Hello, Nightlight employees who are watching and learning more about the Snowflakes Embryo Adoption Program. This is session 2 of an 8-session series of 1/2 hour or less segments about embryo adoption through the Snowflakes program. So today our session is on, is Snowflakes the right choice for an adopting family? We have many families that come to Nightlight seeking adoption services. 9 times out of 10, I'm sure a family who's just looking for us randomly from an internet search or something is not familiar with embryo adoption. So we really encourage all of our employees to be familiar with our Snowflakes program and to educate every family that comes to Nightlight about the opportunity to give birth to your adopted child. So that's one of the reasons these sessions are required watching for every new employee and are made available to our other employees to get refreshed about the Snowflakes program as well. So as we did in our previous section, we're going to start out with a series of questions. Where do the Snowflake inquiries come from? When somebody is an adopting family inquiring about the Snowflakes program, where do they come from? How do they find us? Who might be interested in embryo adoption, and what does the Snowflakes inquiry process look like? And I have Deb Uber on with me today, who's going to be addressing that very specifically because it's one of the things she does on a regular basis. So where do those inquiries come from? Well, fortunately for us, we've been receiving monies from the Department of Health and Human Services to raise awareness about human embryo donation and adoption for many years now. I started working here 10 years ago as only the grant manager, and a couple of years ago took over management of the Snowflakes program. As a marketing professional, I have worked really hard to raise awareness through lots of venues, and you can see the names of some of them listed here. And I'm always trying new things. So these inquiries come from media placements. Usually people call us directly. I love that picture of that little girl. It's so cute. So they may call directly into Nightlight, and they'll be redirected to our Colorado office where either Deb or Paige will be taking their inquiry call. They can find out by visiting our website. We have very high SEO regarding embryo donation and adoption, and so people may visit our website and fill out our inquiry form. It says that Amy manages that through Sam, but really that's Deb and Paige that are managing that now. Amy has moved on to the next phase of her life. And then we can get inquiries via email. The email can come in from the website. That's info@embryoadoption.org, or it can come in from info@snowflakes.org as well. And so those are the various ways that inquiries come into the program, and we get about 100 or more inquiries a month on average for just adopting families. So who might be interested in embryo adoption? I will tell you that almost anyone you talk to either has never heard of embryo adoption before, they look at you like a deer caught in the headlights, or they ask you questions, or they say, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. Tell me more about that. And so one of the ways that we spread awareness, every employee of Nightlight Christian Adoptions, is to be telling people about embryo adoption. And even if you're talking to them about the adoption program that you may specifically work in, why not tell them also about embryo adoption and help them to feel better about Nightlight Christian Adoptions? Because, oh, did you know that Nightlight was the first agency in the world to provide embryo adoption services? And they may say, embryo adoption, what is that? Did you know you can give birth to your adopted child? It's a great way to start an engaging conversation with somebody. And even if it isn't a service that they end up using, they may know somebody down the road, and this comes back to their mind, and they're like, you know what, I learned about this program at Nightlight Christian Adoptions. It might be worth exploring for you. Couples who have tried in vitro fertilization, which is a medical treatment for infertility. In this treatment, they create embryos using the egg and the sperm of the husband and the wife, usually, or they might have to purchase donor eggs or donor sperm. Couples, a lot of times they may go through in vitro fertilization and not have success. Maybe they haven't been able to retrieve any eggs through their hyperstimulation process. Maybe they did get some eggs, they fertilized the eggs, they transferred the embryos, but they didn't achieve a pregnancy. And they may have gone through this 2, 3, or more times, and then they're faced with purchasing donated, quote unquote, human eggs. And the cost of human eggs, if they are a commodity, embryos are not a commodity. Embryos are not bought and sold, but human eggs and human sperm are bought and sold. Human eggs can be very expensive, anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. So that really increases the cost associated with creating embryos through an IVF process. So if a family can't afford that, and that's what the doctor is recommending to them at this point in time, if they are aware of embryo adoption, they can consider using embryos that are already created and waiting for a friendly womb. Families who are waiting for a domestic adoption match, if they are able to carry and they are interested in experiencing pregnancy and childbirth, embryo adoption might be a good opportunity for them. The other nice thing about embryo adoption is the security of the placement. We're not ever guaranteeing that they're going to get pregnant and have a baby, but most of the families who come through our program are successful eventually, even if they've had to go through multiple frozen embryo transfers to have a baby. And in a domestic adoption, we all have heard about those circumstances where the birth mother has chosen an adopting family, a family who has likely been waiting a long time for a birth mother to choose them, and then when she gives birth, she decides to parent, and how devastating that is. So there's a lot more security in the placement of an embryo. Couples who are interested in rescuing embryos out of frozen storage. We have families who come to us with this as their guiding principle for wanting to adopt human embryos. So people really do have a heart for these little nascent human beings who are suspended in frozen storage. And couples who may be concerned about the high cost of IVF, maybe they've been to their OBGYN, maybe they've been to their reproductive endocrinologist and they learn about the cost of IVF and they're like, wow, that is really outside of our league, especially if you're going to have to buy donor eggs. And so in those circumstances, we really want families to know about this option of embryo adoption, which will cost them between, I would say, on average, $14,000 to $16,000 through the Snowflakes program, with all of the costs associated with the program fee, the home study fee, and the frozen embryo transfer fee. So those are the types of people who could potentially be interested in embryo adoption. Next slide, please. Oh, no, I'm doing the slides. Forget that. Sorry, Deb. Are there any restrictions that families are faced with when they're considering embryo adoption? Well, the first restriction would be, can you actually carry a pregnancy to term? So every woman who is interested in adopting embryos through Snowflakes has to go to a physician and have some testing done and have the physician write us a letter that states there are no contraindications to pregnancy, which means the doctor doesn't see that there's any reason why the woman can't carry to term. It doesn't mean that she has carried to term. It just means that they're looking at her physical structure and determining, well, we don't see there's any reason you can't carry to term, you just haven't done it yet. Surrogacy may be another option for families, but the family who chooses to use surrogacy will have to find their surrogate through a separate surrogacy agency. Nightlight does not manage surrogacy nor surrogacy contracts. Those laws surrounding surrogacy are very unique to each state in our union, and so we have chosen not to provide surrogates for our families. But they can use a surrogate, but the placing family needs to know that that's what their plan is, because it may impact their decision to match with that family or not. Nightlight, we have marriage and divorce requirements. A couple needs to be married a minimum of 2 years. We don't count cohabitation, we count marriage. And if a couple is divorced, the person needs to be divorced at least 2 years. They may be remarried at that point. They may be applying as a single person, but they have to be divorced a minimum of 2 years before they can proceed with the application at Snowflakes. We ask that the maximum age for adopting mothers is 48, and for adopting fathers, 55. If it's a single adopting mother, we say 45. And it's like, wow, why do we have all these age restrictions? It's really surrounding our experience over the past 20 years of what the placing parents are looking for when they are placing their embryos with an adopting family. And of course, they're giving consideration to the age of the parents of the embryos that they are going to gift to that adopting family. And they're doing the math, and they're seeing that, wow, if I place my embryos with a woman who's 48, let's do the math on that, she's going to be 66 by the time that child is graduating from high school. So the concerns on the placing parent side have to do with, are they going to stay healthy that long? What about their financial stability? But it's really more about age and the effects of age and the effects that an aging parent has on parenting successfully and through to completion. Hopefully they're not passing away. So, of course, the donor is looking at those types of things. We do not allow for gender selection nor pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, also known as PGD or PGS. This is a method that is available to the medical community now to see, are they boy or girl embryos? Are, these embryos carrying a particular disease or a predisposition to a particular disease? We believe that every embryo deserves an opportunity to live, and so we do not allow for this testing, and we do not allow families to come and say, oh, I only want girl embryos, I only want boy embryos. We just don't allow for that. We do allow singles and the LGBT community to apply. As you saw up above, single women need to be 45 years or less, and that's because single mothers, in the fact that they're single, are more difficult to match with a placing family. They'd be even more difficult to match if they were older than 45 and single. So we put some limitations around that to help us be able to meet the needs of our adopting families as well. We don't want people to come into the program that are never going to be selected by a placing parent. So we're really trying to help the families that are coming to us understand how the program works and the opportunity for them to be matched with a placing family and what that looks like. Let's see. But I have already mentioned that matches are driven by the desires of the placing parents, the genetic parents, and if we're unable to get a match started for a family, if we feel like matching a family might be rather difficult, we have other programs that we may refer these folks to where they might have more success and be matched with a family more quickly. Okay, and now the next slide is about the inquiry process, and I'm going to have Deb speak to that.
Yes, so Paige and I handle the inquiries, any new inquiries that are coming into the program. So our job really is to help educate families when they're first coming in, because they will be coming from just a variety of different situations and places, whether that was that they heard about us after doing infertility treatment, and so they're coming specifically from a clinic and they don't understand adoption in general, or families that have gone through an adoption process and want to switch over to embryo adoption and have that opportunity as well. So whether they contact us through email or phone or the actual SAM inquiry forms that can come in, our first goal is to get them on the phone, because it's a lot easier to talk through their questions and also get to know them. So Paige and my goal in that first call is to get to know their backstory, to figure out what brought them to this program and what they're really looking for in the program itself. So sometimes that is a family that they're coming from a domestic infant adoption process, and it's just been really long for them. They had the domestic infant adoption fall through, and so we're going to be providing education then a little bit more geared towards, okay, what does the medical process look like? Because they're not going to be as familiar with that, versus the family that has been doing infertility treatment. They did IVF, it wasn't successful, before finally a doctor actually referred them and said, well, why don't you try embryo adoption? Those families are going to be learning a lot more about, okay, what is an adoption process? What does that look like? What is the home study for, and what is the purpose behind that? And also things like ongoing communication with a placing family is generally a very new thing for them to learn. So depending on the family where they're coming from, that's our first goal, is to figure out, okay, what's their backstory? What are we really going to need to focus the education on? We're also going to be answering their very first questions, initial questions, in the first 15 to 30-minute long conversation. So normally what comes up during this conversation is going to be cost. It's going to be an overview of the program. It's going to be their timeline. They really want to know the timeline as well. And then we will send over information, which includes an infographic, a visual infographic that you'll be seeing kind of throughout this training, as well as some information packets for them to read through, and also explaining the process in general to get towards application, because they do need to set up an orientation call. So that's pretty much step 2. After they've had that first conversation, they've read through the information packets and have provided a little bit of information to Paige and myself about their situation and their family, then we're going to be setting up an orientation call with both potential parents in this situation. So both the couple need to be on that phone so that we can make sure that we're hearing from both of them, because sometimes I think everybody knows that if there's somebody that's calling, they're usually the one that wants to kind of manage the process. They're a little bit more organized. They usually have more questions, but we really want both the husband and wife to be involved on that call, so that we know that they're both involved, they're both interested. It's not one person that's saying this is what we're going to do and pursuing it themselves. We really want to make sure we're hearing from both of them and they're both getting education. So they'll schedule about an hour-long orientation call. And our main goal is to answer any questions that haven't been covered yet, that have come up after reading through all of the information that we provide, and also to go through mostly the matching process to really explain, okay, here are all the preferences that they're going to be able to provide for the embryos and the placing family that they're going to be matched with. So that can be things like the number of embryos that they might be comfortable receiving. We'll give some recommendations. We'll talk through that with them and get an idea in terms of what numbers are they kind of thinking they might want to be matched with, they'd be comfortable being matched with. That can also be the level of ongoing communication, which is a really big conversation in this orientation call, especially if they are not familiar with openness of any kind. So we'll be providing education for what all is available, which for us includes a semi-closed, a semi-open, and an open adoption. So there's some placements basically that occur that have minimal actual ongoing communication, and then some placements that occur that have a lot more communication. So we'll be talking them through all of those different options that they'll have, the benefits to it, how that kind of plays out with the children that they'll be raising, and then they'll let us know an idea of what they're looking for. It doesn't have to be set in stone at this point. And then you're also going to see preferences like ethnicity, like medical background, that we'll be talking them through. So we want to get a pretty good idea of their preferences, just so that we know an idea for the timeline as well, because their preferences can impact their overall timeline to be matched in the program. And also, if we're seeing something that is going to be a much, much longer match, we want to be able to be upfront with them about that. So if they have a lot of specific requests that are very difficult for us to meet, we can be upfront with them before they haven't made any payments, they haven't committed to the program, so they can really seriously talk about that and decide themselves, are they comfortable with that longer wait time, do they want to adjust their preferences, or do they want to maybe consider a different type of adoption if it's just not fitting within their preferences in general. So after that conversation about matching occurs and we talk about what that looks like, we're also going to be helping to pinpoint the nearest Snowflakes partner clinic to wherever they live. So we have about 33 partner clinics in the U.S. that we work with, and that's where we are shipping embryos to be transferred. And so they'll be sent to basically the nearest partner clinic to them. We'll usually send them 2 to 3 close locations, unless if there's one that happens to be in their city. Usually that's pretty straightforward. So they will be able to figure out and pinpoint, okay, which partner clinic are they wanting to go to, and start contacting them so that they can actually get an idea of what the medical process is going to look like specifically to that fertility clinic, as well as the medical costs that they'll charge, because each partner clinic is going to have their own costs for the frozen embryo transfer. So the very last thing that we're going to be working through in terms of just information in general is going to be the type of home study that they want to pursue. You can either, at least with Snowflakes, you can of course go through the Snowflakes Family Evaluation, which is run by Beth Button, and it's available to basically families throughout the U.S. as well as internationally, but it's not going to go through the same steps that you might see with a full domestic infant adoption type process. So we're going to be talking through kind of the pros and cons of the Snowflakes Family Evaluation, the costs that are associated with that, as well as the full home study, which they can basically complete either with a Nightlight office if they happen to be in a Nightlight state, or with another agency that happens to be in their state if they really feel like a full home study would be beneficial to them. So all of those things will be answered. They'll have a clear picture for them. At the end of that call, we do offer to send over the application at that point if they'd like it, because we really want to make sure they have all of that information up front, can really add that to their conversation if they're deciding if it's a good fit. And then if they want the application from that point, we send it over to them. We help get them started with the paperwork. So after the very last process of what we're doing in the inquiry process is actually reviewing the applications that come in. So once they fill out the application and they send in the application fee, which is $500 as part of the Snowflakes payment, then Paige and I are going to be reviewing that application, making sure that everything is looking good. It shouldn't impact the home study in any way, and then just making sure that it's filled out correctly before we send them over to start working with Stephanie so that she can start with the paperwork, get them started on a home study if that's needed, and she will be kind of helping them from that point after the application and payment has gone through. So it's just a process to really help educate families. Embryo adoption, though our program has been going for 20 years, is still considered new, and there's still a lot of questions that really come in. So we see it as being very beneficial that they can have those questions answered up front before they feel like they have to move forward, so that they're not really feeling nervous when they're actually filling out that application. They really feel like this is the right step. They've gone through everything, all of their questions and concerns, and they can really just move forward with confidence. So that's just the goal of the inquiry process in general.
Thank you, Deb. That was a really great overview. And really what we have found is that as we have implemented this process for inquiries, we really do reduce the number of people who move into the application phase and then never move forward because they found out something and they didn't like it, and so they don't want to move forward. This really helps us to only have the families who truly are interested in moving forward with the Snowflakes program actually move through the application process. So thanks, Deb, for that. Here are some resources that are available to you for Session 2. The Snowflakes Are Falling infographic, personal experience and embryo adoption webinar, and domestic adoption leads to embryo adoption, which is a video. So all of these resources, again, are available to you on embryoadoption.org. So go ahead and visit that website, and you'll find this stuff under videos, under webinars, under resources. Thanks, and next we'll move on to Session 3.